Hey, so it's been a while, everybody. So, my name's Chelsea, and I want to talk to you all, see how all of you are doing, and just sort of update you on what I've been up to. So, hope you're doing well. This is kind of just like a chill stream or video. So, forgive the hiccups. I'm sipping on Mountain Dew right now. Hold on. 1 second. Okay. I just had to check a message real quick. So, it's something I was thinking about, right? And I thought about, like, okay, what has helped me so far in my recovery journey from OCD? So, I think everybody's is going to look different, and that's something that's extremely important to keep in mind. But the biggest thing is to put in effort. Now, if you don't put in effort, like working out every day, for example, then you lose your gains. And mental health is much the same as working out. You are unfortunately playing life on very hard mode. That's just the reality for what it is. And that means you're going to have to work harder than some other people. It also means that your energy is going to be less than other people, that you're going to tire out easier, and that you're going to need more breaks. And so I've learned that playing life by that will result in me losing, right? If I try to live the way a neurotypical person lives, I'm going to lose. That's just what it is. So I have to get inventive and creative. So my best looks different every single day, right? So I'm going to add some notes that I want to pull up, right? And they say the best way to learn is to teach. So that's something that I'd like to do. So the biggest thing is what you resist persists, right? So letting things happen naturally and going with the flow and having an organic approach to life is extremely important to me, because the things we worry about are often the things that are so unlikely to occur. And unfortunately, worry does not solve problems. Problem solving is what happens, right? Problem solving is what actually solves problems, not just going around in a loop consistently over and over again. And I think that's something that's really important to recognize, is that there's a clear distinction between here's what I'm going to do to solve a problem and oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, and then you're playing it over and over and over and you're looping it. So there's a really cool concept in ICBT that talks about reality sensing, right? So this is like, your taste, touch, hearing, your five senses, right? And your smell and your vision. And you use this to help ground yourself, right? As well as progressive muscle relaxation, right? So a way of thinking out is like if you ball up your fist really hard for a couple seconds and then you release all of a sudden, and you imagine your body like liquid, right? You imagine your body just kind of like liquid. It's hard to explain, but it's an experience that you have to where you'll sort of see what I mean. And that's something that's helped me a lot. So abnormal doubts often are like, what could be or might be. So the what ifs can be nonstop and endless and essentially can go on forever and ever and ever. And that's why trying to seek out reassurance for OCD isn't exactly the best thing. What I'd recommend is there's this group called Obsessive Compulsive Anonymous, and they're like a 12 steps group that is specifically designed around OCD, and I think they help a tremendous amount. So that's something that's helped me just so much. And like I said, recognizing like that I'm mentally ill was one of the best things that ever happened. Recognizing like, hey, I've got to put in the effort every single day to maintain gains. And you can either push against that and be like, this isn't fair, or you can accept the hand you're dealt and make lemonade out of the lemons. Of course, like I said, I'm no expert. What works for me is not necessarily going to work for other people. And I think that's why being able to be adaptable is so important. So people often get caught up in all the things they can't do, but the question starts to become like, okay, well, what can you do? And I think that is a beautiful thing that can set you free. Because if you're constantly caught up in your limitations, then you're going to learn helplessness, and you're going to start to sit in this spot where it's like you just feel hopeless. So that's another thing that is really important, is hope and faith for me. And again, I say for me. I'm not saying for everybody, right? So when I tell these stories, I often receive comments like that tell me about, oh, well, this doesn't work for me. Well, no shit, right? Like, the field of psychology is a soft science, which often means that it doesn't necessarily follow the medical model in the way that neuroscience would, for example. So there's a lot more spiritual practices incorporated into psychology, as well as case studies and anecdotes. So it's not necessarily in fact, I would say for the majority of psychology, it's not a one-to-one. It's not this one-size-fits-all approach. There's so many different therapies, treatments, and modalities that it's hard to really even say which one works for which individual, right? You kind of have to be willing to experiment a bit, because there's like rational emotive therapy, there's dialectical behavioral, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, there's trauma focused therapy, there's somatic therapy, there's acceptance and commitment therapy, and the list just goes on and on and on. And as you can see, those are just a few, but they're all, like, some of them are radically different to each other. Like, and now there's one that's starting to come over to us from the East, like East Asian parts of the world, I believe. Don't quote me on that though. But it's inference-based cognitive behavioral therapy, which is something that's like a mostly cognitive approach to OCD. So let me see. I had something here that I wanted to pull up. If you'll just forgive me for a second while I try to find it. Where is it? Oh. Don't mind the background. Oh no, you're good. You're good. Oh yeah, it's another thing, another update. I was able to finally get out of my group home, and I'm living with some really good friends I've known for a couple of years, and I'm pretty happy about that. So that's something that's really great. I got to figure out let me see, the Patreon situation, because I had that for a while and then I forgot. I stopped running that. Trying to find it here. There's some exercise sheets that they have too. Oh shit. Normally I'd be more prepared, but I'm not this time around. Oh shit. Okay. What in the fuck? Okay, so there's 3 different ways of evidence-based treatments for OCD, right? So to break it down, the first is exposure and response prevention, right? So the way this works is you expose yourself to the situation that triggers you, and then you practice on not doing the compulsions or safety behaviors that you normally do. So to give you a brief overview, it's a behavioral intervention that focuses on doing the change, right? So you complete exposures and resist engaging in compulsions. And then there's a second approach that's often complementary with it. So this is what's called acceptance commitment therapy. So Stephen C. Hayes was actually the one who invented this. Now, Dr. Russ Harris has improved upon it as well. So it helps you acknowledge and allow unpleasant thoughts to be there while you commit back to your values, right? So these are like the things that are most important to you. And now, last but not least, what we have is inference-based CBT. So this is a cognitive intervention, like I mentioned previously, that focuses on knowing to make the changes, right? So what we essentially do is we discover the here and now and adjust the story to eliminate the distressing doubt. And each treatment looks at the obsessions and compulsions a little bit differently and approaches them a little bit differently, right? So let's say one of the big worries that somebody with OCD might have if they have hit and run would be, I may hit someone when driving, right? And so for ERP, what you would do is you would do exposures around driving that feel challenging but doable, and that's the key word, right? So maybe sitting in front of the car before driving out of the driveway, and at the same time stopping compulsions like avoiding driving or constant checking. And that's something that's big with OCD is avoidance. So anytime you notice yourself pulling away, you can incorporate this thing that I really like called opposite action, right? So whatever you do, what's the exact reverse opposite of that negative maladaptive behavior? So next approach is the ACT approach, right? Which is acknowledging and making a statement or a declaration to yourself and to the world that driving is important to me because I need to go to work and go to visit my family, right? So you can have unpleasant thoughts and urges while still driving. And it helps to make space between you and your thoughts. And then last, you would take the inference-based approach. And so this would look like taking a moment to realize there is nothing that has happened in the here and now that tells me I have hit someone. And so you would leave the obsessive doubt and story behind because the truth is they don't matter. And so if there's no obsessions, then that means there's no need for compulsions, right? So I guess stuff to know before getting started is there's a few goals for ICBT, okay? So one is that you give zero credibility to the doubt. 2 is that you have no reactions, emotional or behavioral, to the doubt. 3 is that none of your behavior, thinking, or anticipating is driven by the doubt. 4, you now react and use your sense in your old OCD situations as you do in any other situation. And 5, you plan ahead on the basis of the person you know you are, which is your real self. So often you see what's called inferential confusion, right? And so for some of you who are new to ICBT, you might be wondering, what is inferential confusion? So inferential confusion is a distrust of your senses, your common sense, and reality-based information, plus an investment in remote possibilities or hypothetical or imagined possibilities. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll learn to see that your doubt has been created with both reasoning errors and your imagination. And if you recognize this can help to start the process of changing your doubts. Now keep in mind that this is work. This is fucking work, right? So if anything, you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone. So let's go ahead and talk about part one, which is the foundations, okay? So OCD doubts typically fall sequence, okay? There's the trigger, then there's the doubt, then there's the bad thing, unpleasant feeling, and then there's the compulsion to make yourself feel better or to neutralize it or in some way protect you, right? So there are things that make your doubts seem real. So this is like facts and ideas, general rules, hearsay, personal experiences, and last but not least, it's possible, right? So OCD uses your imagination to create all sorts of stories. And so we can change the way we feel about things by changing the story we tell ourselves about it. And then there's the feared / OCD self, which equals the self you fear you will become. But the feared self is the opposite of who we really are. So, now we're going to go down and we're going to talk a little bit about, there's two approaches that you can typically do. You can do a top-down approach or you can do a bottom-up approach, right? So, OCD is imaginary, right? That's what we know for sure. Doubts keep going because of your imagination, not because of reality. So you want to ask yourself, was there any information in the here and now to justify the doubt? And two, did the doubt go beyond objective inner sense information, right? So often doubts are created because they're irrelevant and they're possible is what they often say. But possibility does not equal probability or relevance. Just because something can happen doesn't mean there is evidence in the here and now showing that it will happen, right? And then now there's this concept called the OCD bubble, okay? So what you want to do first is you want to slow down, because oftentimes when people get caught up, they have 1,000 thoughts racing within OCD. Trust me, I live with it. I've lived with it my whole life. And especially if you have like a health anxiety condition going on with OCD, God, that's terrible. So you want to ask yourself, what was the first thought that took me beyond my senses, and how does it make my senses irrelevant? And then two, what you want to do is you want to pause, picture the bridge, right? And hold off on any rituals. And when I say bridge, so there's a bridge between here you are in the land of reality, right? And then here you are in imagination land, right? And so in between is when you can go either left to go to reality or you can go right to imagination land. And so anytime you notice yourself crossing over, you want to practice stopping, taking time to reflect on what's going on, and then you also want to pause and you want to go slowly backwards towards reality. So you can choose what to do, right? Oftentimes people don't recognize that. And so the last part of this is reality sensing, right? Which is practice, practice, practice. Okay, you got to practice a lot, because years of maladaptive behavior can sometimes take years, if not decades, of counter work to be able to, for the most part, get rid of it. Now, there's a difference. I don't say the word cured because oftentimes these conditions are chronic, but you can get it to subclinical levels where you no longer meet clinical criteria for the mental health condition, right? So you can essentially go into remission, in other words, with a lot of these conditions if you put in the work and you consistently do your program. So again, you want to work on trusting your sense, and you do not go beyond your senses, because that brings you to OCD land, right? So there's imagine, there's two ways you can go about it, right? There's a normal doubt, and then there's an obsessional doubt, okay? So again, like I said, you want to ask yourself, is there any direct evidence that justifies this doubt? So if there is, then that makes it a normal doubt, right? And normal doubts are always direct evidence in the here and now using our five senses. It's not using our thoughts up here, right? That's where we start to create concepts, ideas, and images, right? That's inside here. We're looking at the world out here. Is there any evidence out here in the world, not up in your mind where your thoughts and stuff are? Okay? And then if it occurs within the appropriate context and if the doubt can be resolved quickly. That's a normal doubt. Whereas an OCD doubt would... Okay, so this would occur without direct evidence, right? Meaning that it's not supported by reality. And so that would say it's built in our imagination. So it comes from within you, and the doubts linger. Despite the evidence against the doubts, they still tend to hold up, and they're pretty resistant to that. That's how you know it's an obsessional doubt, is it keeps looping and replaying. And if you go back in the video to the obsessional sequence I'm talking about, you'll see what I'm referencing. So, what's the difference between irrelevance to reality? Possible does not equal probable, right? Okay, we've already said this before, but lack of here and now plus imaginary equals irrelevant. One more time. The lack of here and now plus imaginary equals irrelevant. So, how do you practice this? What you do is you think of an example in your everyday life that you would never consider a possibility because it is irrelevant to the here and now. There are plenty of things that we don't worry about because we recognize that there's just no way in hell, or that the chances are so low that it's not even worth crossing our mind. There's this really good story about a dog worrying that it's a cat, okay? And most people would look at that story and recognize, wow, that's silly. But to the dog, in this case, it's just worried because in its mind it's possible, right? And it starts to collect information that would support its doubts. And so you want to look at what is your thought process for the things you don't worry about, and how can you replicate that thought process to this, right? So this is the concept of positive deviance, in which you replicate what you are already doing well, and then oh fuck, I might have to end this. I'm sorry, but god damn it. Oh fuck, look at that shit. That smells so fucking good. Yeah, Patreon will be in the link. Feel free to support it. I'll be doing regular uploads now that I'm not in a fucking loony bin. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm ending this here. I'm sorry. I'm fucking hungry.